When Ryan Bomberger was adopted, he was an African-American baby. His new parents were white. It was not common at that point. In fact, a number of people looked down on it, including Ryan Bomberger's new grandfather.
I grew up in Lancaster County, and the area we grew up was a majority white area, but unfortunately my mom had to deal with a father who could not separate his deep-seated racist feelings. In fact, he said, if you bring in this black child, another word for that, into your home, I'll have nothing to do with you. And so she and my dad had to make that choice, and they made that decision between her father and her newborn son.
This is Family Life Today. Our host is the president of Family Life, Dennis Rainey, and I'm Bob Lepine. And we're going to kick things off today by taking you to a live recording that took place almost a year ago at the Christian Alliance for Orphans Summit in California. Stay with us.
And welcome to Family Life Today. Thanks for joining us. You know, I can, without looking at your schedule, and I know how crowded your schedule gets, I always know that there are a few dates every year that are blocked out and kind of sacred. You've been at every Orphan Summit since we hosted the first one back at Family Life headquarters, and there were about 35 people in the room, right?
That's right. There's been 8 of them, and we're here live with the audience of...
Yeah, in fact, we had a live studio audience joining us. Yeah.
Barbara and I really believe in the issue of the orphan and going near the orphan and talking about adoption and foster care. And we count it a privilege to be a part of giving voice to those who don't have a voice. In fact, over the years, I've said one of the big problems in the Christian community, I think, is we've done a fairly good job of being pro-life, but we haven't done a good job of being pro-life and pro-orphan, pro-adoption. If we could overturn the laws and have abortion overruled, there would be hundreds of thousands of babies. In the Christian community, because it hasn't been pro-adoption, I think they'd be overwhelmed by it. And we've got someone here with us today, Ryan Bomberger, who has a compelling story of both pro-life and pro-adoption. Ryan, welcome to our broadcast.
Thank you. It's great to be here.
Ryan is married to his wife, Bethany. She's somewhere in the audience. Bethany, would you stand up? Where are you? Stand up down here. There she is.
That's my girl.
They live in Virginia Beach along with their 4 children and give leadership to the Radiance Foundation, which is a life-affirming nonprofit. We'll talk more about that later. Ryan is an Emmy Award-winning creative professional. He's a blogger, a speaker, a writer, and a champion for the value of human life. And Ryan, there have been a lot of folks who've invested in your life, a lot of heroes who have invested heavily in your life. Tell us about the first hero and her story.
The first hero would be my birth mom. And it's amazing when you think of courage and strength personified. A lot of times people don't think of birth moms as some of the first people, especially when they face circumstances like my birth mom did. I'm one of those cases that even pro-lifers have an issue with sometimes. I'm one of those marginal cases, the fringe cases, that even pro-lifers will write off. My biological mother was raped, and yet despite that unspeakable trauma she went through 9 months of pregnancy, choosing courageously life. And so I'd have to say she's my first hero. I wouldn't be here speaking to you. Yeah. That would be kind of a problem. You'd have an empty seat right here or somebody else, but she's absolutely my first hero. I cannot imagine what she went through, the unspeakable violence, but her courage showed that beauty can rise from the ashes of something so unspeakable.
Obviously, you didn't know the details until later, but you learned that she had a lot of anger during that pregnancy and even up till the moment you were born, right?
Yes, I actually had the privilege of speaking. I found the social worker handled the adoption case, and she explained to me that my biological mother was angry, as did my mom. These were the notes given to them by the agency. But she was really angry and hurt. Of course, you can understand that. She didn't want to even see me. She kept saying she didn't want to see me as soon as she gave birth. She just wanted to separate. But there was a change. The social worker noticed when I was born. She asked to be able to see me and to hold me. And I don't know what broke, but obviously something broke. The social worker said she even smiled, and she felt like there was a moment of healing at that point in time.
You were adopted by a family of really of all places in Lancaster, Pennsylvania.
Oh yeah, apple dumplings and whoopie pies.
And when you were adopted, they already had 3 biological children?
Yeah, they had 3 homemade ones.
You were the first.
Yeah.
You were the first import? Is that what we call you? Huh?
Yeah, I was the first import, yes. I was an exotic import.
An exotic?
Yeah. I don't know.
That's a good way to call it. Huh?
They didn't know what to do with me. It was special.
Well, and in fact, it was an exotic choice, one that cost your mom, in making the choice to bring you into the family, there was a price she paid.
Yes, I mean, I grew up in Lancaster County, and the area we grew up was a majority white area, but unfortunately my mom had to deal with a father who could not separate his deep-seated racist feelings. In fact, he said, and I don't know if I can say it in your broadcast, but he said, if you bring in this black child, another word for that, into your home, I'll have nothing to do with you. And so she had to make the decision between her father and her newborn son. She chose well. I'm just saying. But seriously, I mean, the pain that she had to go through, because she had to lose a father in order to gain a son. And I think it represents the sacrifice that parents go through on a regular basis. Whether you're an adoptive parent or not, there's always sacrifice. But she and my dad had to make that choice. And they made that choice, so she did lose her father.
Why do you think she made that choice?
She knew there was a greater calling. I mean, she was abandoned as a child. This is where it all started. She was abandoned as a child because her alcoholic father and her mother were separating, and she was put in an orphanage. And at the age of 5, she made a promise to God that she would be a mommy to those who didn't have one. So it was something that was in her heart for a long time. And so that wasn't enough of an obstacle. She knew that God had called her to be a mommy and to love the mess out of children who didn't have someone to call mommy or daddy. So it was painful for her. I mean, extremely painful, but she knew that God had called her to help unleash purpose in the children that she had adopted. 10 of us, by the way.
Speak to the issue of ethnicities, multiple ethnicities in an adopted family. I mean, there's the foster care system has over 400,000 children in it right now. 115,000 or so are able to be adopted right now, but the issue of ethnicity comes up as a reason not to engage the foster care system or adopt. Speak to that if you would.
Yeah, it's a shame, especially as Christians. We should be willing to engage this issue. And we're at the Radiance Foundation, we're strong advocates of transracial adoption. We're advocates of same-race adoptions as well, but unfortunately, children like me and some of my siblings would languish in foster care because race was transcended all. And we see the destruction when race transcends all. In fact, the National Association of Black Social Workers is one of the things that when we educate people about abortion awareness and adoption, we talk about the National Association of Black Social Workers that decreed in 1972 that a black child should not be placed in a white home for any reason. And they reinforced that in 1994. And this is the prevailing attitude when it comes to foster care, which is why kinship care is often focused on. And tragically, it fails too often returning black children to the foster care system.
Well, and part of the reason for this is the whole idea of ethnic identity. And a lot of adoptive kids wrestle with identity issues, even if they're of the same ethnicity as their parents. What about you in junior high school? Did you struggle with any of these identity issues that are common?
I think that is common. I mean, kids struggle with a myriad of issues, whether you're adopted or not.
That's right.
Those years, those very formative years, teenage years, are kind of crazy, tumultuous. Yeah, I went through some of that. And because it's part of the normal process of growing up, especially if you grow up in a majority white community, you'll have some of those issues. But because the foundation in the home was love, was security, was stability, was our faith, which informed everything, it really helped me get through some of those things. There were some tough moments, but what you find, there's a researcher, Rita Simon, who finds that more than 87% of children who are transracially adopted are well-adjusted, socially well-adjusted, and embrace their identity, their cultural and racial ethnic identity in a healthy way.
You met Bethany at college, and she was engaged in this arena as a single lady as well, right?
Well, she headed a committee. This is how we met. It was a love at first sight moment. She was heading a committee where I was singing in this group called Surreal, and we were doing a benefit concert for Crisis Pregnancy Center. And so we locked eyes, and well, anyway, the whole world changed. But she's always had a heart for those who are broken. She's a teacher by profession. She is my better half, and she's also the one in charge of the Radiance Foundation. So, and I have no problem with the women being in charge. I see all the guys kind of quiet, women clapping, woo! But her heart was that. But our story, part of the Radiance Foundation story, is predicated even on her own experience, having been a single mom for a year and knowing what that's like. That's why we identify and we reach out to birth moms. So she knows that experience. I know coming in as a father, being a father to our daughter, Haley Radiance. Our organization's actually named after her. So we can identify. We know what it feels like to be in that broken place. And so we have a heart to see how hope, how love, how truth can transform.
As you dated, did you guys talk about adopting, about the needs of orphans? I mean, obviously you're raising money for a crisis pregnancy unit there.
Well, when we first dated, I remember walking on a path and, outside and talking about how, we're going to have X number of children. Ooh, it's amazing how things can change when you get married and have a few first, and just, being on this side of the adoption equation. Being an adoptee, you have one perspective. Being the parent, you have another. But I think what ends up happening is we have this openness to where God wants to lead us. We aren't setting these parameters. We're saying, God, use us. And, with 4 children right now, our youngest being adopted, our most recent adoption, we're just open to where God leads us.
You learned some of your story, you said, from the social worker and, of course, from your mom. Did you ever try to seek out your birth mom?
I did. I mean, it's amazing how many times people have this sort of talk show mentality that there's always this blissful reunion when, a biological child, reunites with a biological parent. That's mostly untrue. I know, TV's actually mostly untrue. But I found that most of my siblings, or some of my siblings who did reconnect, it wasn't this joyous occasion. But I wanted to pursue finding her because I didn't want a relationship, but I wanted to be able to thank her. I'd written a song called Meant to Be, which is the music behind this video that I call Unwanted. And I wanted her to have a copy of it. And it's my way of just saying thank you for going through 9 months of traumatic pregnancy. And, you allowed me to be loved and to love others. And so the court unsealed my adoption records and they pursued her. They could not find her. So they kept it open for about 3 months longer than normal, but there was no response. So at this time, I've not been able to reconnect. But all I really want to do is have that conversation that is my song Meant to Be, and thanking her, even though words are insufficient sometimes to say to a birth mom, thank you for giving me life. But it was my attempt to thank her. And I believe that one day, someday, I actually may connect with her. And I can't wait to have that conversation.
You are obviously pro-life, staunch, little bit, and pro-orphan, pro-adoption. Speak to the Christian community about why we need to keep those in proper tension and be going near the needs of the orphan.
Well, being pro-life, I think we're often too comfortable with a very narrow definition of what that means. It's kind of like when I think of slavery in America, it's kind of saying like, yes, I'm pro-emancipation of slaves, but I'm not going to worry about, racism or citizenship. So let's not worry about the 14th Amendment or the 15th Amendment to give black people the right to vote. It was good enough they were just emancipated. It's only part of the equation. And so what I want to speak to Christians, and a lot of times it's simply just a matter of not being aware, which is what we try to do through the Radiance Foundation, which many organizations represented here do. It's the education, it's reaching heart to heart to have people's minds and their spirit open up to what it really means to be pro-life.
You also are a champion for birth mothers. And it seems like at points, those of us in the Christian communities, as we see a young lady who is pregnant outside of marriage, we can tend to be on the judgmental side rather than coming alongside her and cheering her on for protecting unborn life, and then doing what is almost the unthinkable, being so courageous as to take that life that has been carried for 9 months and placing it in the arms of another family. Speak to your heart about birth mothers and how the Christian community needs to really be advocates for birth moms.
I think it should be a natural outflowing of we as Christians who are called to love one another. It should be part of our DNA. I mean, there's no salvation without adoption. Yet when it comes to birth moms, and we tend to forget that we have also been redeemed from something. So unfortunately, we don't focus enough on loving and cherishing these women who are often abandoned, sadly, by the men who were part of the 50% of that biological equation. What we launched through the Radiance Foundation is something called sallyslambs.org, and it's our way of cherishing birth moms while celebrating adoption. And we want to bring focus to these women who do make that choice and come alongside of them, provide the resources, material, emotional, spiritual, because there has to be that focus. And it's just part of what we do through the Radiance Foundation. I know there are many out there who do the same thing on a one-to-one level or through their organizations. But I think we need to increase that focus for those of us who consider ourselves pro-life and are advocates of adoption. You can't advocate adoption without loving all of those involved in that whole equation.
The Radiance, yeah, I agree with that. The Radiance Foundation a number of years ago took on a pretty delicate issue within the African American community, and you gained national exposure. Explain what you did and what happened.
Well, we decided that we were going to take on two of the easiest topics, non-controversial topics, abortion and race, and launch an ad campaign in the Deep South, which apparently the Civil War just ended there. So, yeah, it was like sparks flying, and it was crazy. I'd read some of the reports, about who I was, because they didn't want to, the news media is always trying to divide, which, if you haven't noticed, that's what they love to do, to divide instead of saying what is truly going on. But we wanted to launch this campaign because of the disproportionate impact in the black community. It's kind of like a breast cancer awareness campaign. I mean, how many of us have seen breast cancer awareness ads featuring men? None. But features women because they're the demographic most impacted. And we took that same approach. So it was the first public ad campaign, TooManyAborted.com. Billboards that said black children are an endangered species, TooManyAborted.com. More endangered by death by abortion than any other racial demographic. In fact, their abortion occurs up to 5.8 times more in the black community than in the majority population. And where that happens is the home of Planned Parenthood, New York City. 1,000 black babies are born. 1,489 are aborted. So it has risen to epidemic levels. So we launched this campaign along with Dr. Alveda King and Walter Hoy and other civil rights leaders to wake up the black community and wake up leaders to deal with this epidemic of abortion.
Well, I just want you to know I really applaud you speaking out on behalf of the unborn and also calling the Christian community to go near the orphan. Occasionally on Family Life Today, we'll conclude a broadcast by inviting the guest to say some words to a person who's been significant in his or her life. And in this case, I'm going to ask you to address two people. It's as though I could seat your birth mother across the table from you right now. I'd like you to address her and express what you'd like to express to her. And then after you've addressed her, I'd like to seat your parents, your mom and dad. And I'd like you to address them. Would you like to make a pass at this?
Sure, I'll take a swing. I think, honestly, the only way I can address my birth mom is to kind of invoke some of the words from the song that I'd written. Can I do that? A little unconventional?
Sure.
Okay. So the song would be the conversation, and it would go like this. It goes, I know I was meant to be. This life was meant for me. Though you went through so much pain. Oh, your tears, they were not in vain. Although you what God had planned for me. I know I was meant to be. So this is some of the words. And then after I finished crying, I would go on to my parents. I mean, what do you say to two people who most of the world would have said, what are you doing? Why are you sacrificing all this? You could have had this. My parents our family owns a department store. They financially could have been much better off. I mean, it's not every day you choose to have 13 children, but whether you adopt 13 or you adopt one, there's always sacrifice involved. And I can't think of any other words to tell my parents, and I still tell them over and over today, I love them. I love them. I love them for giving me life. I love them for cherishing me. I love them for feeding me, for educating me, for clothing me, for putting up with me. Oh my goodness. I was a little bit of a problem child, but I would say, Mom and Dad, I hope to be a fraction of who you are to others. They've taught me to love and cherish other people. They've taught me to serve, and they've served anonymously most of their lives. They have given up so much the world would consider given up materially. Didn't matter to them, because what they poured out could never be replaced. So honestly, I would just sit here, hug the mess out of them. They're about this tall. Hug the mess out of them and just say, thank you, I love you, I love you, I want to be like you.
You know, you've really talked a lot today about the power of an individual and how one person can make a difference in another person's life and be a generational messenger touching the life of the orphan. We don't think of the sin of Sodom and Gomorrah as being one of failing to care for orphans and going near the needy. But listen to what God said through the prophet Ezekiel, speaking of the sin of Sodom. Behold, this was the guilt of your sister Sodom. She and her daughters had pride, excess food, and prosperous ease, but did not aid the poor and the needy. They were haughty and did an abomination before me, so I removed them when I saw it. America is a blessed country. The Christian community is a blessed community. And I just appreciate you, Ryan, and sharing your story and the Radiance Foundation, you and Bethany. I pray God's best and favor upon you and those 4 kiddos. May God's favor be upon you. Thanks for being on the broadcast.
Thank you.
Well, we've been listening to a conversation recorded with Ryan Bomberger about 10 months ago now at the Christian Alliance for Orphans Summit in California. And coming up here in a couple of weeks, the first week in May, I think it's May 2nd and 3rd, we're going to be at the Christian Alliance for Orphans Summit number 9 in Nashville, Tennessee. We're going to be recording some Family Life Today programs there this year. And if you'd like more information about what happens at the summit, maybe you'd like to attend, network with other people who have a heart for adoption and for orphan care, go to FamilyLifeToday.com and click on the link you find there that'll take you to the Christian Alliance for Orphans website. All the details about Summit 9 can be found there. Once again, our website is FamilyLifeToday.com. You'll also find resources we have available to help you think through whether adoption is the right decision for your family, whether it's something you should consider, and what kinds of questions should you be asking as you pray about adoption. We have other resources available that can help you understand how you can be a part of caring for the needs of orphans all around the world. There are a number of different ways that we can be involved in expressing God's heart for the orphan in our local church, in our community, and in other parts of the world. Go to FamilyLifeToday.com and click on the link that says Hope for Orphans. That'll take you to an area of our website where you'll find many resources we have available. And finally, there's a link at FamilyLifeToday.com for the Radiance Foundation. That's the organization that Ryan Bomberger heads up. If you'd like more information about what he is doing, go to FamilyLifeToday.com and click on the link for the Radiance Foundation.